5 years away from home teaches you how silence feels when no one's waiting for you to break it. I stood in my family's living room for the first time in years, watching my uncle spin his latest tale. Times are tough. The house has to go. We can't sit on debt forever. Dad would have wanted us to be smart about this. His voice filled the room like it always did. Loud. Sure. Empty. Aunt Linda nodded. Cousin Greg stared at his phone. And the house, the one my father built board by board, waited for someone to speak for it. I took a slow breath. No anger. Just timing. Funny, I said, voice low but steady. I thought the person holding the mortgage gets to decide if it's for sale. The room stilled. Uncle Rob laughed, sharp and dismissive. What are you talking about? You've been gone for years. You don't even own a car, much less this house. I slipped the envelope from my jacket, set it on the coffee table, without a sound. Paid the back taxes last month. Acquired your mortgage 2 weeks ago. Quietly, legally, while you were busy refinancing bad habits. He froze, not used to hearing someone else in the room, without raising their voice. Aunt Linda blinked. You bought the debt? I met her eyes. No, I bought the silence you left in its place. Uncle Rob stepped forward, voice tighter now. You think that makes you the hero here? I smiled. Small. Honest. No, but it makes me the one holding the pen. The pen that could sign the foreclosure papers. Or forgive the debt. Either way, the story no longer belonged to him. The room sat quiet, waiting for what came next. But I'd learned something in 5 years away. You don't fill every silence. Sometimes you let it speak for itself. I turned to leave. You've got 30 days to figure out what family means to you. After that, it's just business. No shouting. No final word. Just a quiet shift of power slipping out of his hands. And back where it should have been all along. I walked out into the cold, steady air. For the first time since Dad died, it felt like home wasn't waiting to be stolen anymore. The next morning, I sat in the county records office. Same cracked linoleum floors. Same clerk who barely looked up from her crossword puzzle. I slid the file request across the counter, looking for probate records on the Carter estate, filed 5 years ago. Should have shown a full inheritance transfer. She scrolled without a word, then paused, brows knit, finger tapping the screen. That's odd. What? Transfer was incomplete. Your name's on the original will. But the final documents, they never listed you as a beneficiary. I felt it then. Not anger, not surprise. Just the cold clarity of a puzzle you always knew had missing pieces. Who signed off on the change? She slid the screen around. One name, clear as daylight. Robert Carter. My uncle, executor of his estate, and, apparently, editor of the truth. I leaned back, letting the weight settle. While I was halfway across the world, wearing a uniform Dad helped me earn, he was rewriting my family story in legal ink. You want a copy? The clerk asked. Yeah, make it 2. I walked out with the papers in my hand, not shaking, not boiling, just steady. You don't need anger when the facts are enough. I sat in my truck, letting the wind rattle the antenna. 5 years away. And in one signature, he'd erased me from my own home. But there was one thing he forgot. Paperwork works both ways. If he could steal it through a loophole, I could take it back through one. I thumbed the corner of the mortgage deed. My name, his debt, the balance had shifted. Now it was just a matter of how quietly I wanted to make it fall. Emily found me by the old hardware store parking lot. Same place Dad used to take me for coffee on Saturdays. Different conversations now. She leaned against my truck, arms crossed, eyes sharp. You didn't waste time shaking the dust off. I smiled faintly. 5 years is enough dust for anyone. She tilted her head, searching for a crack in my calm. So what's the plan? Public humiliation? Foreclose the house and call it justice. I rested my arm on the truck door. You tell me. Did he tell you how he took my name off Dad's? Well, when I wasn't here to stop him. Her jaw tightened. There it was. The thing she suspected, but couldn't say out loud. He said, It was complicated. That dad wanted the house to stay in the family. I met her gaze. Then maybe he should have left the family whole enough to live in it. For a moment, the street noise filled a gap where truth used to live. She softened slightly. You think burning it down fixes what he broke? I shook my head. I'm not burning anything. I'm holding the water bucket and waiting to see if he lights the match himself. She smiled. Small, bitter. That sounds more like Dad than you. Maybe 5 years changes people. She stepped back, pulling her coat tighter. If you're here to make him suffer, don't drag the rest of us through it. I nodded. I'm here to remind him there are consequences. What happens after that is his call. She turned to go but paused. And what happens to the house? I let that settle. Depends who shows up to fight for it, and who pretends they didn't see what happened 5 years ago. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. The question would follow her home. I watched her walk away, the mortgage papers still sitting in my passenger seat. One way or another, the house was no longer his story to tell. I sat in the truck until the sun slid low behind the grain elevators. No music, no engine, just the ticking of the cooling hood and the quiet I've been avoiding since I came home. I pulled the mortgage papers from the seat beside me, ran a thumb over my father's name, faded in the fine print of a debt he never signed for. I whispered it into the empty cab, soft, like I was afraid to break the quiet. I trusted you to protect this place, Dad, but you left me alone with him. It wasn't anger. It was absence, the kind that doesn't roar, it just echoes. Dad taught me how to hold a wrench, how to stand when the world pushed back. But he never taught me what to do when the betrayal came from inside the fence line. I thought about the last time we spoke before I deployed. He said, hold the line when you can. Step back when you must, but never leave it unguarded. And maybe I stepped back too far. Gave Rob just enough room to move the fence post when no one was watching. I folded the papers carefully, slipped them back into the folder. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the house anymore. It was about not leaving the line unguarded again. I started the engine, letting it hum steady beneath me. Tomorrow, I'd meet with the bank, set the next move in place. But tonight, I sat with the truth. I'd left the fight 5 years ago because I thought distance made you safe. Turns out, it just makes it easier for the wrong hands to grab what you leave behind. I rested my hand on the worn steering wheel, the one Dad rebuilt when I was 16. And for the first time since he died, I wasn't waiting for someone else to fix this. I was already holding the tools. The bank records didn't lie. They never do. I met with Mr. Halpern, the same loan officer Dad used to fish with on weekends. Age had softened his features, but not his memory. He slid the folder across the desk. I shouldn't be showing you this, but I figure blood deserves to know where the water's rising. Inside, overdue notices, second mortgages, missed payments stacked like autumn leaves. Rob hadn't just stolen my inheritance. He'd leveraged it again and again until the only thing left was a house sinking beneath its own roofline. I flipped through the pages. Steady, tax liens, refinancing agreements, and at the bottom, the foreclosure timeline. 60 days. Unless someone bought the debt outright. No one's come forward yet. I asked. Halpern shook his head. Not yet, but it's open season now. Anyone with the cash can settle the debt and hold the note. I sat back, let the weight of it settle. I didn't have to build a fight. I just had to hold the paper no one else wanted. I'll buy it, I said, voice steady. Halpern blinked. You serious? More serious than Rob was when he borrowed against a house that wasn't his. He scratched his chin. You know this puts you in the driver's seat, right? Foreclose, refinance, lease it back to him. Hell, evict him if you wanted. I nodded. Or remind him what happens when the story you steal finally comes home. We drew up the paperwork. Quiet, efficient, no courtroom, no headlines. Just me and the truth. Finally on the same side of a signature. By noon, I held the deed of trust, and with it his future. I walked out of the bank into the cold morning light. The street didn't cheer. The sky didn't shift. But something in me did. For the first time since Dad died, the story didn't end with someone else holding the pen. It ended with me, and I wasn't finished writing yet. That night, I sat in the truck with the deed folded in my jacket pocket, thicker than it looked, heavier than it should have been. I thought about the day I left town, 5 years ago. Duffel bag in the bed of this same truck. Dad shaking my hand like I was already a man. "Hold the line," he said. "The ones who stay behind are supposed to guard what matters." I believed him. I believed they would. I left thinking blood meant protection, that leaving home meant you could trust it to still be there when you came back. But while I was halfway across the world counting days till home, Rob was counting dollar signs on a house that wasn't his. I remembered reading his letters overseas. Casual, surface deep. We're keeping things steady back home. You just focus on staying safe. The betrayal wasn't in what he said. It was in what he never wrote. No mention of the refinancing. No hint of the signatures he forged beneath my father's name. No warning that when I came home wouldn't be waiting. I rested my head against the seat. Regret didn't burn like it used to. It sat quiet. The kind of ache that teaches you something you should have known sooner. Family doesn't always guard the house when you leave. Sometimes they sell the lock before you close the door. I opened the glove box, where Dad's old property maps still sat folded. Ran my hand over the faded pencil lines. The fields, the house, the fences he walked every Sunday after church. I whispered it into the quiet. I left the line unguarded. "Dad, but I'm back now. Tomorrow I draw new lines. Maybe not in dirt, but on paper they couldn't erase this time. No more waiting for someone else to defend what mattered. Now I was the one holding the gate. I found Emily the next morning at the cafe downtown. Same corner booth Dad used to sit in. Same cracked window overlooking Main Street. She looked up from her coffee, guarded. "You here to twist the knife some more?" I slid into the booth, steady. If I wanted to hurt him, I'd have done it years ago. She let that hang. Then why now? I let out a slow breath, because I spent 5 years thinking distance would fix what I couldn't face, and all it did was give him room to rewrite the truth. She looked away, chewing on that. I didn't come back for revenge, Emily. I came back because someone has to hold the line Dad left behind. Her voice dropped. "So this is about Dad?" I nodded. It always was. He worked his whole life for that house, for this family. And Rob spent half a decade cashing out like an ATM with no password. Her shoulders softened, just barely. "You think taking the mortgage makes it right?" "No, but letting him lose it without accountability wouldn't be right either." She stirred her coffee slow. "I thought you left because you didn't care anymore." I met her gaze. "I left because I thought I could trust someone else to care while I was gone. I was wrong. The quiet between us wasn't hostile this time. It was tired. But maybe tired is where truth finds a place to sit." "So what now?" she asked. I folded my hands on the table. Now he has a choice. Face what he did, or lose what he stole. She gave a faint smile, small and weary. "You sound like him." "Who?" "Grandpa. Quiet, stubborn, but always standing where it mattered most." I smiled back, soft, honest. Maybe I finally learned something from him after all. The waitress refilled our cups without asking. Old places remember old stories. And for the first time in a long time, I was explaining myself to be heard. I was explaining because someone was finally listening. I met Mr. Reyes that afternoon. Small office, bigger filing cabinets and windows. The kind of man who didn't waste words when paperwork could speak louder. He flipped through the mortgage file, brow furrowed but steady. "You bought the debt outright. That makes you the lien holder. Technically, you own the house until mortgage is paid in full or foreclosed." I nodded. I'm not here to take his roof. I just want the truth on the table for once. Reyes leaned back, folding his hands. "Most folks in your position would file eviction tomorrow. I'm not most folks." He smiled faintly. I gathered. He slid a form across the desk. "If you want to give him a chance to settle, this notice gives him 30 days. No loopholes. No back doors. If he ignores it, foreclosure begins. If he responds, you negotiate terms. I signed it without hesitation. Steady hand. Clear mind. Send it today. Certified mail. No arguments about who knew what. Reyes nodded, impressed. Your father would have handled it the same way. Quiet. Clean. The words landed soft but deep. Dad wasn't here to see this. But maybe his way was. Reyes gathered the papers. I'll file the notice by 4. After that, it's on him. I stood, offered my hand. He shook it once. Firm. Final. You're not the first soldier come home to a battlefield that never left the front porch. I smiled, tired but real. But maybe I'll be the last to let it win. I left the office with no banners, no victory. Just the weight of responsibility in a manila envelope under my arm. Tomorrow, the notice would land on Rob's doorstep. What he did with it wasn't mine to control. But what I did next, that was... The next day, the family gathered at my uncle's place. Same house where Dad's voice used to fill the walls. Now quiet in ways that hurt. Rob laughed too loud when I walked in, like covering cracks with noise. Decided to join us, soldier? Don't worry, we've got the family business under control. I didn't smile, didn't answer. I set the manila envelope down on the dining table. Same table where he'd signed my name away 5 years ago. No speeches, no threats, just a simple sentence. 30 days. He froze. Smile gone, voice caught somewhere between charm and fear. What is this? I tapped the envelope once. It's what happens when debt runs faster than lies. Aunt Linda reached for it, fingers trembling. Emily watched in the corner, eyes steady now. Rob flipped open the envelope, saw his name, saw mine, and for the first time in his life, saw a story he didn't control. You wouldn't. I met his gaze calm. I already did. The room held its breath, waiting for him to spin it, to joke, to threaten, to blame. But all he said was, "This is my house." I nodded once. For now. Then I turned to leave, because sometimes the loudest victory is the one you don't stick around to watch fall. Emily caught up to me on the porch. You could have humiliated him in there. Why didn't you? I smiled faintly. Humiliation fades, but 30 days stays taped to fridge. She let out a quiet laugh, small but honest. You're colder than you used to be. I shook my head. No, just done burning myself trying to keep everyone else warm. I stepped off the porch. Behind me, the house sat silent, not in peace, but in truth, and that was enough for now. Emily found me later that evening by the old grain silo. Same place we used to climb as kids before the world taught us how far we could fall. She leaned against the rusted ladder, arms crossed, voice low. You really gonna let him lose the house? I didn't answer right away. Let the wind fill the space where an easy answer would have lived. He made the choices. I just bought the consequences. She stared at the dirt between her boots. It's not just his house. Mom lives there. My little brother grew up there. I nodded, steady. That's why I gave him 30 days, not 3. She let out a slow breath. I always thought if I stayed quiet long enough, the family would stay whole. Turns out, we've been cracked since before you left. I met her gaze. Silence doesn't hold things together. It just hides where they broke. Her voice softened. So what happens if he calls your bluff? It's not a bluff. She gave a faint, tired smile. Not cruel, just worn out. Guess part of me was hoping you'd still be the kid who let him win to keep the peace. I smiled back, small but honest. That kid didn't come home this time. She kicked a rock near her boot. If you need me at the hearing, or to tell the truth when the family starts spinning it, I'll be there. I nodded once. Didn't thank her. Didn't have to. Some alliances aren't declared. They just show up when the wind changes. The sun dipped low behind the silo. Shadows stretching like old memories across the field. I turned to leave. You've got your own choices to make, Em. Just don't wait 5 years to make them like I did. She stayed leaning against the ladder, but I think, for the first time, she wasn't holding up the silence anymore. I spent the next morning at the county clerk's office, filed the formal notice of intent. Quiet, clean, legal, no press, no family letters, just a stack of papers that said, "Your clock's running out." After that, I sat down with Mr. Reyes again. If he contests, how long until this gets messy? He tapped the desk, steady. He'll try to delay it, maybe file an objection about family intent. But it won't hold. You've got the paperwork. You've got the timeline. He's out of wiggle room. I nodded. Then we keep it simple. We drafted the final notices, filed the court dates, set the 30-day review in stone. Then I spent the afternoon walking the perimeter of the farm. The fences were still holding. For now. Caleb called that night. His voice steady, no small talk. "Uncle Rob's been calling the family. Spinning it fast. Says you're here to steal what's left of Grandpa's legacy." I smiled, tired but unsurprised. He's the one who sold it. I'm just buying the receipt. Caleb paused. "You want me to set the record straight with them?" I thought about it, then shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "No. Let the silence sit with them a while. They'll figure out which version of the story feels heavier in the end. Some battles aren't fought with arguments. They're won by who stays standing when the noise runs out of breath." I hung up, stared out at the dark fields. I didn't need them to pick a side. I just needed them to stop pretending there wasn't one. Tomorrow, the certified letter would land on Rob's porch. 30 days to pay the debt or lose the house. I didn't expect him to sleep much tonight, but for the first time in years, I would. The foreclosure notice landed on Rob's door Friday morning. Bright red sticker. Bold black letters. Unmistakable. Unavoidable. By noon, the call started. First to my aunt, then to his lawyer, then eventually to me. I let it ring the first 3 times. Picked up on the 4th. "You think this makes you the better man?" Rob barked. I stayed steady. "It makes me the man who paid your debt." He growled through the static. "You're not taking this house. I'll get the money. I'll refinance. You'll see." I leaned against the truck door, calm. 30 days. After that, the house chooses who paid for it. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked halfway through. Fear doesn't hide well when it's out of excuses. That afternoon, I saw him pacing the front porch, phone glued to his ear, talking fast to anyone who'd listen. Neighbors watched from across the street, same ones who used to wave when Dad mowed the lawn. Now, watching a man drown in his own flood. I didn't interrupt, didn't warn him. Sometimes the clock needs to tick loud enough for them to finally hear it. Emily texted later. "He's calling every bank in town. No one's biting." I replied, "They'll lend to men who own their mistakes, not to those still blaming someone else for them." The days stretched thin. 28 left, then 27. I spent the time clearing the north fence, replacing the gate hinges Dad always meant to fix. It's funny how the smallest repairs remind you what's still worth protecting. By nightfall, the town knew. And Rob? He finally realized silence wasn't protecting him anymore. It was isolating him. I stood by the fence line as the sun dipped low, the house in the distance. Quiet for the first time in years. Some battles end with noise. Some with a ticking clock. This one, with the weight of 30 days. And a door he could no longer slam shut. Rob finally showed up at my place on day 23. Didn't knock. Just stood at the edge of the porch, shifting his weight like a man used to walking into rooms already won. "You made your point," he said, arms crossed. "What do you want?" I sipped my coffee, steady. What I wanted was 5 years ago, when you could have honored Dad's will without me having to buy it back. He laughed, dry and sharp. "Come on, kid. The world isn't fair. You know that. You take what's left when the smoke clears." I smiled faintly, because I remembered those same words. He'd told me them on the front porch the day of Dad's funeral. "World's not fair, Marcus. Sometimes you gotta grab what's on the table before someone else does." Back then, I swallowed it, believed maybe that was how men survived. But now, I met his eyes calm. No, sometimes you leave what's on the table because it was never yours to take. He flinched. Small, but enough. You going to foreclose? I stood slowly, setting my coffee down. You've got one choice left. Fix what you broke, or lose what you stole. He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off, quiet, sharp. This isn't a war anymore, Rob. It's just you deciding how long you want to sit in the rubble. The wind picked up through the porch rails. Neither of us moved. Finally, he lowered his gaze. I'll figure something out. See that you do. He turned to leave, shoulders smaller than I remembered. But before he hit the steps, I added one last thing. Dad didn't build that house for you to pawn it. He built it for people who show up when it breaks. He didn't answer, but the quiet behind him said enough. I sat back down, picked up my coffee, and let the wind carry the rest of the words I didn't need to say. The family gathered at Aunt Linda's on Sunday afternoon. Same floral couch, same weak coffee, but the air felt heavier. Rob sat by the window, arms folded, trying to look in control while the walls closed in. I stood beside the mantel, foreclosure packet in hand. No accusations, no anger, just a truth that finally showed up for itself. I spoke steady. 5 years ago, this family lost a father, and in the silence that followed, Rob took what wasn't his hold. Murmurs rippled through the cousins, some surprised, most not. Rob's jaw tightened. I did what needed to be done. I kept the house afloat when no one else would. I met his gaze. You didn't keep it afloat. You sold off the floorboards and called it leadership. Aunt Linda cleared her throat. Soft but weary. We can't lose the house. I nodded. No one has to, but someone has to pay for the roof they borrowed against. Rob's voice cracked. You wouldn't do this. Not to your own blood. I let the silence answer before I did. Blood didn't stop you. The room stilled. No one argued, because the truth had been sitting here longer than I had. I laid the foreclosure packet on the coffee table. 30 days still stands. I didn't shorten the clock when I bought your debt. I'm giving you the same deadline the bank would have. Only difference is, you can't lie your way out of this one. He stared at the papers, didn't open them. Emily sat in the corner, watching, quiet but present. Her face said what no one else did. About time. I turned to leave, because the conversation was done. Some battles end with shouting. This one ended when the silence finally ran out of places to hide. A week passed without a word. No calls, no arguments, no checks in the mail. Then Friday afternoon, I found a sealed envelope slipped under my door. No return address, but the handwriting was his. Inside, a cashier's check. Partial payment. Nowhere near the full debt, but enough to say one thing. He finally stopped pretending nothing was owed. No apology note. No plea for leniency. Just numbers on paper. And a signature written without excuses. I set the check on the table beside the foreclosure notice. 2 stories. Same house. Different endings still waiting to be written. Emily texted later. He sold his boat. Put the shop tools up for auction. I smiled faintly. Guess the house means something when the toys stop matching. I didn't cash the check that day. Not yet. Some debts deserve a pause before you collect them. I walked the fence line that evening. The wind softer. The air lighter somehow. Dad used to say, it's not about whether they fix it. It's about whether they finally saw what broke. Maybe Rob hadn't rebuilt the house, but for the first time, he picked up a board. The next morning, I left a simple note in his mailbox. Partial payment received. Balance remains. Clock still running. No threat. No mercy. Just truth. Because redemption isn't a gift. It's earned in pieces. I stood by the old oak tree as the sun rose, the field stretching quiet before me. And for the first time since I was 25, I wasn't waiting for him to fix what he broke. I was letting him decide whether he would finish what he finally started. Sunday morning came quiet. No footsteps on the porch. No truck in the driveway. Just stillness. The kind that feels earned, not empty. I poured coffee into Dad's old mug, the one with the chipped handle and faded logo from a feed store. It felt good in my hands again. For the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel like a battleground. It felt like mine. I sat at the kitchen table, foreclosure notice still folded beside the mortgage statement. Not gone, but no longer burning a hole through the room. I didn't win anything, but I wasn't losing any more either. I opened the window, let the spring wind carry through the kitchen. No noise from the street, no calls from the bank, just the quiet hum of a home still standing. I thought about Rob. Maybe he'd finish paying. Maybe he wouldn't. But I wasn't going to measure my peace by his pace anymore. I picked up the deed, ran my thumb along the edges. Legal proof of what Dad left me. Spiritual proof of what I almost let go. I whispered aloud. Not for anyone to hear but me. It was never about the house. It was about whether I still knew how to protect it. And today, I did. I left the deed on the shelf beside Dad's old toolbox. No frame, no plaque, just a reminder. Some things you don't own to show off. You own them to hold the line. I stepped outside as the wind rustled the fields. The same wind that carried me away 5 years ago. Only this time, I wasn't running. This time, I was home. Monday morning was plain. Coffee brewed. Sunlight stretched across the kitchen floor. Nothing urgent. Nothing broken. The phone stayed silent. No lawyers. No family counsel. No desperate voicemails from Rob. I sat on the porch, boots crossed at the ankle, watching the wind ease to the north field. Same place Dad used to sit on Sundays. Watching nothing, noticing everything. Emily stopped by around noon. Dropped off a box of old family photos. No explanation. No apology. Just left them on the porch and gave a small nod before driving off. I carried the box inside. Flipped through the photos one by one. Birthdays. Fishing trips. Fence repairs. And one shot of me and Rob as kids, standing by the foundation of the house before it ever had walls. I set that one aside. Not out of anger. Out of honesty. Some stories don't change, but the people in them can. I taped a small note to the fridge beside the foreclosure notice. It read, Day 22. No urgency. Just tracking time. Letting the clock breathe. The house creaked as the wind shifted. The kind of creak that tells you something's old, but still standing. I spent the afternoon fixing the back gate. The one Dad always said he'd get to next spring. Guess spring finally came. By sunset, the house was quiet again. But for the first time, it didn't feel like silence was covering a wound. It felt like space finally left to heal. I poured one last cup of coffee, sat on the steps, and let the day end without trying to hold on to it. Tomorrow, the clock would still tick. But tonight, the house stayed ours. The next morning, I found myself fixing the south fence. Same post Dad fixed 3 times before I turned 18. Same post Rob drove into with a truck when we were kids. Funny how some things never stop needing work. The boards were worn but holding. Kinda like me. I hammered the last nail in, wiped the sweat from my brow, and leaned against the post. For a long while, I just stood there, not building anything new, not tearing anything down, just holding the line. A truck pulled up by the gate. Emily stepped out, toolbox in hand. No greeting, no invitation. She just walked over, handed me the wrench. Thought you might need this. I smiled faintly. Appreciate it. She leaned against the opposite post. You think he'll make the next payment? I shrugged. Depends on whether he finally sees what's worth saving, or just keeps fighting over what he already lost. She looked out over the fields. Same horizon Dad used to stare at. The kind that tells you there's nothing ahead but your own choices. You used to be the one fixing everything while we broke it, she said. I let the words settle. Maybe I was just the one who stayed when it broke. She smiled, tired but honest. That counted for something now. For the first time in years. I didn't feel like the kid patching holes no one else saw. I felt like the man holding space for something better to grow. She helped me gather the tools without another word. Sometimes family doesn't need to be rebuilt. It just needs to be quiet long enough to find its footing again. I watched her drive away down the old dirt road, and for the first time, the fence stayed standing, even when I wasn't holding it up. That evening, I stood on the front porch, same spot Dad stood every Sunday night before locking the doors. Only now, the keys were in my hand. The house creaked in the wind, not complaining, just reminding me it was still here, still standing. I walked the perimeter one last time, before dark. The fence held, the roof line steady. For now, that was enough. By the mailbox, I paused. Taped inside was a note in Rob's handwriting. Simple, rough, no signature. Next payment coming Friday. No apology, no explanations. But sometimes action speaks where words always fell short. I folded the note, tucked it into my pocket, not to frame it, just to remember that some stories don't end clean. They just keep going. On the porch step, I sat with Dad's old flashlight beside me, the one he used to shine across the field to make sure the gates were closed. I didn't turn it on. Some nights, the dark doesn't mean danger. It just means you trust what you built in daylight. I thought about the future. One day maybe Caleb or Emily's kids would sit on this porch, asking why the gate still squeaked or the fence still leaned west in the wind. And maybe someone would tell them, because we fixed what we could, and we left the rest standing. That's legacy, not the land, not the debt, not the arguments still echoing through family dinners. But the decision to stay when walking away would have been easier. I stood, stretched, and locked the door behind me. The keys clinked against my palm. Mine now, and earned. And for the first time since Dad left this earth, the house didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a choice. That night, the house was quiet again. But it wasn't the silence of loss. It was the stillness that comes when the storm finally leaves. I sat by the kitchen window, cup of coffee cooling beside me, keys resting on the table. No threats, no waiting for the next move. Just peace. Earned, not given. I thought about Dad, how he never chased legacy. He just showed up for it, one fence post at a time. And maybe that's what I finally did. Not claim what was stolen, but guard what was left. Rob might make the next payment, or he might not. But either way, I wouldn't carry his debt on my back anymore. The wind shifted through the open window. Same wind I left behind 5 years ago. Only now it felt like home again. I took a deep breath, slow and steady. No finish line, no applause, just another night in a house still standing. And maybe that's enough. If your family's legacy was stolen while you were gone, would you come back to fight for it? Or would you leave the keys on the table and walk away for good?